When Maya Jenkins walks into her own luxury car dealership dressed in casual clothes, no one recognizes her as the owner. Instead, she's redirected to more suitable used cars and dismissed by staff who can't see beyond her skin color. What begins as an undercover mission becomes a reckoning as Maya reveals her true identity, upending power dynamics and forcing a privileged sales team to confront their biases. In the showroom's gleaming reflections, assumptions shatter like glass. Will Maya dismantle the dealership culture, or will entrenched prejudice drive her out of the world she rightfully owns? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story has touched you, make sure to subscribe because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Jenkins stood in her modest apartment bathroom, studying her reflection. At 42, her face showed the quiet determination of someone who had fought for everything she'd achieved. The faint lines around her eyes testified to years of late nights poring over spreadsheets and sales reports. She smoothed her simple navy blouse and adjusted her charcoal slacks, purposefully understated. Today wasn't about power suits or executive presence. Today was about truth. The bathroom counter held remnants of her usual morning routine, an expensive moisturizer next to drugstore makeup, a silent testament to a woman who navigated different worlds. Maya tucked a lock behind her ear, remembering her father's words from decades ago, "They'll judge you twice, once for being black, once for being a woman. So be 10 times as good." 6 months ago, Maya had purchased Horizon Motors, a struggling luxury dealership in Oakwood Heights, a wealthy suburban area where homes started at 7 figures and status was measured by what sat in circular driveways. The previous owner, her mentor Raymond Williams, had sold it to her before his retirement, believing in her business acumen despite the industry's notorious resistance to change, particularly when that change came in the form of a black woman. "You ready for this?" she asked her reflection, thinking of Raymond's advice from the day she signed the paperwork. "Sometimes the best way to change a system is to understand it from the inside first. Let them show you who they really are before you show them who you are." Maya had deliberately kept her ownership quiet during the transition. Raymond had introduced her as a consultant, evaluating operations, and the current general manager, Vincent Foster, a silver-haired man with old-school charm and older-school prejudices, had been running day-to-day operations. The staff knew changes were coming but not their extent or source. She gathered her things, a leather-bound notebook gifted by her late mother, her phone, and the quiet confidence that had carried her through 2 decades in the auto industry. This methodical approach reflected what Jonathan Gottschall would call the storytelling animal in action. Maya was crafting her own narrative, carefully controlling what others saw while she observed the unfiltered truth. In the kitchen, she hesitated before her coffee maker, remembering last night's conversation with her sister Tasha over dinner. "You really think going undercover is necessary?" Tasha had asked, twirling pasta around her fork. "Seems like something from a bad TV movie." "I need to see how they treat people when they don't think the boss is watching," Maya replied, the weight of experience in her voice. "Especially people who look like me. 20 years in this business has taught me the smiles that vanish when you turn away, the assumptions made before you've said a word." "And if they fail your test?" Tasha pressed. Maya had sipped her wine deliberately before answering. "Then they'll learn what kind of leader I really am." Now, as she drove through morning traffic in her 3-year-old Lexus, reliable but not flashy, Maya rehearsed scenarios in her mind. She'd been the only black woman in countless dealership training sessions, boardrooms and sales conferences. She'd endured the subtle looks and not-so-subtle comments, worked twice as hard for half the recognition. She'd built a reputation as the woman who could turn around struggling dealerships, but always under someone else's banner. Today marked the beginning of something new, her vision, her rules. The dealership came into view around a gentle curve, Horizon Motors, all glass and chrome gleaming in the morning sun, luxury vehicles arranged like jewels on display. The landscaping was immaculate, the signage elegant, the overall impression one of exclusivity. Maya felt a surge of pride. This was hers now, bought with years of sacrifice and strategic planning. Yet she bypassed the employee entrance and parked her sensible sedan in the customer lot rather than the reserved executive space that was rightfully hers. She checked her reflection one last time in the rearview mirror, deliberately removing the designer watch that had been another gift to herself when she made regional manager 5 years ago. Today she would be just another customer, just another black woman walking into a luxury space where many would assume she didn't belong. Maya took a deep breath and stepped out, embodying the first stage of what Joseph Campbell would call the hero's journey, the departure from the known world into one of challenge and revelation. The cool air of the showroom wrapped around Maya as she entered, her eyes adjusting to the carefully crafted lighting design to make every vehicle's contours appear even more seductive. The space smelled of leather, subtle cologne, and the faint chemical sweetness of the detailing products they used to make each car gleam like new. Mozart played softly through hidden speakers, cultured, refined, establishing the atmosphere for those who belonged in this temple of luxury. A few sales associates milled about, some chatting near the Italian espresso machine that hummed gently in the corner, others hovering near customers who looked ready to spend. Everyone seemed to be performing their role in this carefully orchestrated theater of commerce. Maya felt the slight shift in energy as she entered, the quick glances that assessed and dismissed her in the same moment, the subtle straightening of backs as people returned to their previous conversations. These were the microaggressions she had documented throughout her career, not overt enough to call out, but unmistakable to those who experienced them daily. She moved through the space with deliberate slowness, pausing occasionally to examine vehicles, running her fingers along a carbon fiber dashboard, peering at the detailed stitching on a leather interior. Each touch was both an evaluation and a claim to space. This was the crossing the threshold moment Campbell described in The Hero's Journey, where the protagonist enters the special world where the ordinary rules would be tested. Near a sleek SUV designed for wealthy families who never took it off-road, a tall, slender man in his 30s noticed her and detached himself from the coffee station. Derek Thomas, Maya recognized him from personnel files, new hire, solid sales record, previously worked at a mid-range dealership across town. His smile seemed genuine if perfunctory, his pinstriped suit well-fitted but not bespoke. "Good morning. Looking for anything specific today?" he asked, maintaining a professional distance, hands clasped loosely in front of him. "Just browsing for now," Maya replied, her tone casual but observant, her eyes continuing to scan the showroom. "You have some beautiful inventory." "We certainly do," Derek said, his posture relaxing slightly. He gestured toward the vehicles. "Our selection is curated to offer exceptional driving experiences. The new GT model has been particularly popular." His tone was polite but lacked the enthusiastic pitch she'd overheard him giving to the older gentleman in the corner, the one whose Italian loafers probably cost more than Maya's entire outfit. This was information gathering for her mental dossier, not overtly disrespectful but telling nonetheless. "I'll take my time looking," she said with a smile that conveyed both warmth and dismissal. "Of course," Derek replied, stepping back. "Feel free to look around, and I'm here if you have questions." As he walked away, Maya continued her deliberate tour, noticing how the staff positioned themselves, who they approached quickly, who they let wander, the subtle hierarchy of attention that reflected their assessment of a customer's worth. She quietly evaluated the inventory layout, the pricing strategies, the way certain models were highlighted while others were tucked away. Her trained eye spotted 3 pricing inconsistencies and a display strategy that buried their most profitable models. Through the artful choreography of the showroom, Maya tracked the dynamics from the corner of her eye. That's when she overheard it, a conversation between Vincent and a female sales manager partially hidden by a support column near the financing offices. "We've got another one," Vincent said in a lowered voice, nodding subtly in Maya's direction while pretending to review something on a tablet. "Probably just killing time in the AC." The woman, Melissa Carter, Maya recognized from her file. 10 years at the dealership, consistently in the top 3 for sales, divorced, living in the affluent Lakeview neighborhood, glanced over with practiced casualness. Her tailored pantsuit in charcoal gray projected authority, her pearl earrings wealth without ostentation. "You want me to handle it?" Melissa asked, her manicured nails tapping against the tablet she held. "Give it a few minutes," Vincent replied, his silver hair catching the light as he tilted his head. "She's not touching anything expensive yet." Maya felt the familiar knot in her stomach, not shock, but the weary recognition of a pattern she'd encountered throughout her career. As Annette Simmons would describe in The Story Factor, Maya was experiencing the power of the unspoken narrative others were creating about her, one based entirely on appearance, a story they believed without questioning its premises. She deliberately pivoted, moving with purpose toward the high-end section, where the German imports gleamed under specialized lighting. Her hand traced the sleek line of a $120,000 sedan, the flagship model with its distinctive grille and hand-stitched interior. With practiced ease, she opened the driver's door, sliding into the buttery leather seat that adjusted to her form like a second skin. The reaction was immediate. Vincent's head turned sharply, and he murmured something to Melissa, who straightened her blazer and approached with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her heels clicked a staccato rhythm on the polished concrete floor, the sound announcing her approach like a warning. "Finding everything all right?" Melissa asked, her tone a careful balance of propriety and distance, one hand resting possessively on the car's roof. "This is beautiful," Maya said, running her hands over the steering wheel with the appreciation of someone who understood the engineering behind the luxury. "What's the torque on this model?" The specs online were impressive. A flicker of surprise crossed Melissa's face, perhaps at the technical question, before she recovered, her professional mask slipping back into place. "It's 553 pound-feet. Are you familiar with our luxury line?" "I've been researching," Maya said simply, noting how Melissa seemed to recalibrate her approach, the subtle shift in posture that acknowledged Maya might not be what she had initially assumed. "Well," Melissa continued, her voice taking on the practiced cadence of a prepared speech, "these vehicles typically require substantial financing. Our in-house options start at—" "I wasn't asking about financing," Maya interrupted gently, meeting Melissa's gaze directly. "I was asking about performance. How does it handle on tight corners compared to last year's model?" Melissa's smile tightened, her eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly. "Of course. Why don't we start with something that might be more suitable? We have some excellent certified pre-owned options that still offer impressive performance at a more accessible price point." And there it was, the assumption, the redirect, the subtle dismissal that Maya had experienced countless times before. According to John Yorke's narrative theory in Into the Woods, this was the inciting incident that would propel the story forward into inevitable conflict, the moment when the protagonist decides to actively challenge the status quo. "Actually," Maya said, rising from the seat with fluid grace, her expression pleasant but resolute, "I'd like to speak with the general manager, please." Vincent's office sat at the far end of the showroom, separated by a wall of glass that allowed him to survey his domain while maintaining an air of exclusivity. Inside, the space was a shrine to automotive success. Plaques for regional sales achievements lined the walls, framed photos showed Vincent alongside celebrities who had purchased vehicles, and miniature models of luxury cars sat on his imposing mahogany desk, arranged like chessmen ready for the next strategic move. The room smelled of sandalwood and ambition. A half-empty cup of espresso sat cooling on a silver coaster emblazoned with the dealership's logo. The bookshelves behind his desk displayed automotive magazines open to features on Horizon Motors, each one carefully positioned to showcase Vincent's accomplishments to anyone who entered his territory. He welcomed Maya with the practiced charm of someone who'd built a career on first impressions, standing as she entered, gesturing to a sleek leather guest chair that sat noticeably lower than his own, a subtle power play that Maya immediately recognized. His handshake was firm but brief, his smile calculated to display confidence without revealing genuine warmth. "Melissa mentioned you wanted to speak with me," he said, leaning back in his leather chair, the material creaking softly under his weight. The silver cufflinks on his French-cuffed shirt caught the light as he steepled his fingers. "How can I help you today, Ms. Jenkins?" Maya supplied, deliberately leaving off any title. She sat with perfect posture, refusing to be diminished by the lower chair, her expression neutral but attentive. "I've been observing your showroom for the past hour, and I have some concerns about how your staff approaches certain customers." Vincent's smile didn't waver, but his eyes narrowed slightly, the crinkles at their corners deepening. A muscle twitched almost imperceptibly at his jaw. "I'm sorry to hear that. Customer experience is our top priority at Horizon. We pride ourselves on exceptional service." "Is it?" Maya asked, her voice calm but firm. She crossed her legs, her movements unhurried. "Because I noticed a distinct difference in how your team treated the older gentleman in the blue suit versus how they treated me." Vincent's right hand moved to straighten his already impeccable burgundy tie, a nervous tick he probably wasn't aware of. He leaned forward slightly, shifting the power dynamic, his desk now a barrier between them rather than a platform. "We have a diverse clientele," he said, his tone measured but defensive. "Our approach is always tailored to individual customer needs." Maya met his gaze steadily. "So it's about needs, not assumptions?" The question hung in the air between them, challenging the carefully constructed narrative Vincent had presented. His smile faltered for just a moment before he clasped his hands together on the desk, his signet ring glinting under the recessed lighting. "I assure you, Ms. Jenkins, we treat all our customers with respect. If there was a misunderstanding with Melissa or any of our staff—" "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Maya said, her words precise as a surgeon's scalpel. "Your sales manager assumed I couldn't afford the vehicles and tried to redirect me to used cars without even asking about my budget or needs. She made that assessment based solely on my appearance." Vincent's expression hardened slightly, the veneer of charm thinning. "Ms. Jenkins, I've been in this business for 27 years. Our staff is trained to help customers find vehicles that match their requirements. Sometimes that includes discussing various price points." Maya leaned forward slightly, mirroring his posture. "And how did Melissa determine my price point, Mr. Foster? Was it my skin color? My casual clothing? What exactly signaled to her that I couldn't afford a car on your showroom floor?" The question was direct, impossible to deflect with platitudes. Vincent's face flushed slightly, a pink tinge creeping up from his collar. He reached for his espresso cup, found it empty, and set it down again with more force than necessary. "That's quite an accusation," he said, his voice lower now, an edge creeping in. "I think you're misinterpreting what happened." "Am I?" Maya asked, reaching into her bag and extracting her phone. "Would you like to hear the recording of my conversation with Melissa? Where she specifically suggested I might be more comfortable at a dealership that specializes in pre-owned vehicles." Vincent's eyes widened slightly. "You recorded a conversation in my dealership?" "It's legal in this state with one-party consent," Maya replied smoothly. "But that's not the point. The point is that I didn't come here to browse, Mr. Foster. I came here to evaluate." Vincent's brow furrowed, the lines deepening across his forehead. "Evaluate? The culture of this dealership. The customer experience. The assumptions your staff makes about who belongs in a luxury showroom and who doesn't." Understanding began to dawn on Vincent's face, but he was still a step behind. He straightened in his chair, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "Are you with a consulting firm? Corporate should have informed me." "I'm not with a consulting firm," Maya said, reaching into her bag again and extracting a business card, which she slid across the polished surface of the desk. The card was simple but elegant, heavy cream cardstock with raised lettering in deep navy blue. "I'm the owner." The color drained from Vincent's face as he read the card, his fingertips whitening where they pressed against the desk. This was what Campbell would call the revelation, the moment when the hero's true identity is revealed, shifting the power dynamic entirely. "You're?" He looked up, confusion and shock battling across his features. "You're Raymond's? I thought the new owner was—" He stammered, unable to complete the sentence. "A man?" Maya supplied, her voice steady. "Someone who looks different from me?" Vincent swallowed hard, his carefully constructed image of confidence crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. The plaques and photographs on the wall seemed to mock him now, testaments to success built on assumptions that were disintegrating before his eyes. "We were told the dealership had been acquired by MJ Enterprises," he said finally, his voice strained as he tried to regain composure. "I assumed—" "You assumed MJ was a man," Maya finished for him, nodding slightly. "Just like your staff assumed I couldn't afford the cars on your showroom floor." Vincent's gaze dropped to the business card again, as if hoping the lettering might rearrange itself into something less threatening to his worldview. "Ms. Jenkins," he began, searching for words, "I can assure you that if I had known—" "That's exactly the point," Maya cut in, her voice gentle but unyielding. "The way your staff treated me shouldn't change based on who they think I am or what position I hold. Every person who walks through those doors deserves the same respect, the same quality of service." Vincent looked stricken, caught between defensiveness and the sudden understanding that his career now hung in the balance. This confrontation represented what York would call the midpoint of the narrative, the moment when everything changes, and the protagonist gains new power or understanding. The hierarchy had been upended, and Vincent now found himself accountable to someone he had, moments ago, been subtly dismissing. "I would like to call a staff meeting," Maya said, rising from her chair, now towering over the still-seated Vincent. "Immediately." Vincent nodded mutely, reaching for his phone with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "Of course, Ms. Jenkins. Right away." Word spread through the dealership like wildfire, traveling through text messages and hurried whispers in the break room. Maya watched from Vincent's office, her office now, as he gathered the sales team in the glass-walled conference room that overlooked the service bay. Through the transparent barrier, she could see the staff arriving in ones and twos, their faces showing varying degrees of confusion and apprehension. Melissa arrived last, her stride less confident than it had been on the showroom floor. She slipped into a seat near the back, smoothing her blazer with hands that betrayed a slight tremor. Vincent stood at the head of the table, his complexion still ashen, eyes darting occasionally toward the office where Maya observed the tableau unfolding before her. The room hummed with nervous energy. Derek leaned over to whisper something to a colleague who shook his head in disbelief. A veteran salesman in his 60s, whose personnel file listed him as Richard Harmon, rubbed his chin thoughtfully, his eyes narrowing as he studied Vincent's uncharacteristic discomfort. Two younger associates exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. This was the moment Gottschall might identify as the societal mirror, when a story reveals uncomfortable truths about our collective behaviors and biases. Like characters in a morality play, each employee would now face the consequences of a culture they had either actively perpetuated or passively accepted. Maya straightened her blouse, took a measured breath, and walked the 20 paces from the office to the conference room. The click of her sensible shoes echoed in the suddenly silent hallway, marking the rhythm of approaching change. She pushed open the glass door, the cool metal of the handle grounding her in the moment. The silence deepened as she entered, becoming almost tangible. Vincent cleared his throat awkwardly, his usual commanding presence diminished by the revelation that had upended his understanding of the hierarchy. "Team," he began, his voice lacking its usual resonance, "I'd like to introduce you to Maya Jenkins, the new owner of Horizon Motors." 15 pairs of eyes turned to Maya, expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment to confusion. Melissa's face turned ashen, her manicured hand rising unconsciously to her throat as recognition dawned. Derek's eyebrows shot up, his lips parting in surprise. Richard's weathered face remained impassive, though his eyes narrowed further, reassessing the woman before him. Maya took her place at the head of the table, gently but firmly displacing Vincent, who moved awkwardly to a seat midway down. The physical rearrangement mirrored the power shift that had occurred, swift, definitive, and impossible to ignore. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice steady and clear, carrying to every corner of the now silent room. "I'm Maya Jenkins, the new owner of Horizon Motors. For those who aren't aware, I acquired the dealership from Raymond Williams 6 months ago." She paused, letting the significance of her words settle over the room like the first snow of winter, transforming everything it touched. "Some of you met me briefly during the transition, though I was introduced as a consultant. Today, however, I experienced your dealership as a customer would, specifically as a black woman would." She met each gaze in turn, her expression neither accusatory nor angry but resolute. When her eyes landed on Melissa, the sales manager looked down at the polished conference table, unable to maintain contact. "I want to be clear," Maya continued, resting her hands lightly on the table. "I didn't arrange this experiment to embarrass anyone or to play gotcha. I did it because I needed to understand the culture of this dealership in its natural state, how you operate when you think no one important is watching." The words hung in the air, their implication unmistakable. A few staff members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of the younger associates, a woman with auburn hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, bit her lip nervously. "What I experienced today revealed both strengths and significant areas for improvement," Maya continued. "Some of you did well." Her eyes found Derek briefly. "You were polite and professional if a bit reserved. Others." Her gaze deliberately avoided Melissa, removing the sting of direct accusation while making the reference clear, made assumptions that have no place in a business that values every customer. Vincent stared at his hands, folded tightly on the table. Richard's expression had shifted from assessment to something approaching respect, though caution still lined his features. Melissa looked up finally, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of shame and defensiveness. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone," Maya said, her tone softening slightly. "I came here because Raymond believed in this dealership's potential, and so do I. But that potential can only be realized if every person who walks through those doors is treated with equal respect and enthusiasm, regardless of their appearance, gender, or race." The tension in the room began to shift, fear giving way to attentiveness. This was no longer about individual embarrassment but about collective responsibility. The narrative had expanded beyond personal failings to encompass systemic challenges, just as Simmons would describe in her work on organizational storytelling. "So," Maya said, standing tall at the head of the table, her presence filling the room despite her modest attire, "let's have an honest conversation about what happened today and more importantly, where we go from here." 3 months later, Maya stood in her office, formerly Vincent's, looking out over a transformed showroom. The physical space was largely the same. The gleaming vehicles still caught the light at carefully calculated angles, the Italian espresso machine still hummed in the corner, and Mozart still played softly through hidden speakers. But the energy had shifted dramatically, like a house where the windows had finally been opened after a long winter. The glass walls offered her a perfect vantage point to observe the fruits of difficult conversations and deliberate change. She watched as Melissa, who had initially been the most resistant to Maya's leadership, warmly welcomed a young woman in ripped jeans and a vintage t-shirt. 3 months ago, that same customer might have been subtly directed toward the pre-owned section or politely ignored. Now, Melissa was taking time to show her the high-performance models, animated as she explained the engineering specifications without a hint of condescension. Across the showroom, Derek was in deep conversation with an elderly couple, his body language open and attentive as he patiently explained the technological features of a luxury SUV without talking down to them. The old Richard Harmon might have swooped in to rescue such a sale, assuming the couple couldn't possibly understand the complexities of modern vehicles. The new Richard, who had surprised Maya with his willingness to evolve, was instead working with a young family, helping their children explore the tactile experience of fine leather while discussing safety features with the parents. The changes hadn't come easily. The first month after Maya's revelation had been tense, with some staff members walking on eggshells while others resisted the new direction with passive aggression or outright skepticism. Maya had weathered their resistance with a steady hand, implementing changes that were substantive without being punitive. The morning training sessions, the revised commission structures, the community outreach programs, all had faced initial pushback before gradually gaining acceptance. The door opened with a soft click, and Maya turned to see Raymond entering, his familiar smile widening as he took in the scene. Though he moved more slowly now, leaning slightly on a handcrafted walking stick, his eyes were as sharp as ever, missing nothing as he surveyed what had once been his domain. "Looks like you've been busy," he said, embracing Maya briefly, the scent of his familiar aftershave bringing back memories of the day he'd first hired her 20 years ago. The wrinkles around his eyes had deepened since then, but his belief in her had never wavered. "You could say that," she replied, guiding him to a comfortable chair by the window. On the wall behind her desk hung a single framed photograph, Maya and Raymond on the day she'd made regional manager, both beaming with pride. It was the only personal touch in an otherwise minimalist office space. The first month was challenging. Raymond nodded, settling into the chair with a soft grunt. "Transformation usually is. Vincent." "Resigned after 6 weeks," Maya said, pouring Raymond a cup of tea from the ceramic pot on her desk, Earl Grey his favorite. He couldn't adjust to the new expectations. Said he was more comfortable with traditional leadership structures. Raymond raised an eyebrow, taking the cup with a nod of thanks. Translation: he couldn't handle reporting to you. "Among other things," Maya acknowledged, a wry smile playing at her lips. "A few others left too. The old guard who believed luxury car sales was an exclusive club with membership requirements that went beyond skill and knowledge." "And the bottom line?" Raymond asked, the businessman in him still alert to the practical realities of change. Maya smiled, sliding a leather-bound report across the desk. The Horizon Motors logo gleamed in silver embossing on its cover, redesigned under her direction to look toward the future rather than glorifying the past. "Up 17%. Turns out, treating everyone like they belong here is good for business." Raymond studied the numbers, clearly impressed, his index finger tracing the upward trajectory of the sales graph. "I knew you were the right person for this," he said, looking up at her with undisguised pride. "You've always seen possibilities where others saw problems." "We still have work to do," Maya said, leaning against the desk as she gazed out at her team. "But the culture is changing, not just here but in how we engage with the community. We've implemented new training that goes beyond sales techniques to address unconscious bias. We've revised commission structures to reward customer satisfaction over quick sales. We've established community outreach programs that bring automotive education to neighborhoods that dealerships typically ignore." She paused, watching as a young black man in a security uniform entered the showroom, glancing around uncertainly before Derek approached him with genuine warmth. But the most powerful change has been the stories. Every morning meeting starts with someone sharing an experience that challenged their assumptions. This was what Campbell would call the return with the elixir. The hero coming back to the ordinary world with new wisdom and the power to transform it. Maya had completed her journey not by conquering her enemies but by transforming the very foundation of the system she had entered. "It's not just about selling cars," Maya continued, a quiet passion infusing her voice. "It's about creating a space where everyone is valued, where assumptions are checked at the door. It's about recognizing that excellence comes in all colors, genders, and clothing styles." Raymond nodded, understanding. "And Melissa? I notice she's still here, despite your rough start." Maya smiled, her eyes finding the sales manager across the showroom. "She's becoming one of our strongest advocates for change." After that first confrontation, she came to me privately and shared something I hadn't known. That 10 years ago, as one of the only women in luxury car sales, she'd faced her own battles with bias. Somewhere along the way, she'd learned to survive by adopting the very behaviors that had once excluded her. And now? Raymond asked. Now she's relearning what it means to truly see people, Maya said. Sometimes, the people most resistant initially become your biggest supporters once they see the vision. They just need someone to believe transformation is possible. As they walked back into the showroom, Maya greeted her staff by name, the respect in their eyes no longer tinged with surprise or resentment. She had transformed not just a business but a narrative, challenging the story of who belongs in luxury spaces and who has the authority to lead them. In the terms York would recognize, she had completed the narrative circle, returning to where she started but fundamentally changed, bringing that change to everyone around her. And like the storytelling animal Gottschall described, she had rewritten a cultural story that needed challenging, creating space for new possibilities and perceptions. That evening, as Maya prepared to leave, she paused by the showroom window, catching her reflection in the glass. The woman looking back at her now moved through the world she had shaped, rather than simply navigating the one others had created for her. This was perhaps the most powerful story of all, the one where we recognize our power to transform not just ourselves but the world around us.